Hey there, we're going to do a copy of this drawing by Jean Fouquet, a French artist. But we're going to mix it up a little today and watch a strange video that I found right here on YouTube that purports to be about this artist, although it's hard to consistently identify him. So without further ado, Jean Fouquet.
Look! Is it really?
Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans.
And she's the one who found the magic sword of France?
I greet you, my king, legitimate son of kings, and I bring to you the aid of the King of the Heavens.
There's your wages, children. What about you? Don't you want to be my page?
I already have a job, my lord. I'm an apprentice glazier.
So much the worse for you.
Goodbye, Jean. Goodbye. I'm sorry you're not coming with us. Goodbye, Jean.
Glass can't be overloaded with color. It has to maintain its transparency.
Then I want to become a painter.
We were supposed to get married with that money.
And so we will. Dearest, I promise. I promise.
Gilles de Rais, you have been accused of evil crimes. Do you recognize your guilt?
I wish to confess. I murdered over 400 children. The Duke had the honor of playing host to His Holiness Eugene IV several years ago.
There are two. I imagine just one. Why are they divided?
Because they are two separate worlds, the earthly and the heavenly.
Etienne Chevalier wants his book of gold to be more beautiful than the one the Duke of Berry has, and more important than the Duke of Bedford's. The colors will make the difference, Mary. Do you recognize yourself?
I'm touched.
A full frontal view of you would be flat.
Here I am. I'm finished for the night.
Well, that was strange. So let's get ready to start our copy. So we're going to please attempt to draw not only the head but the shoulders and torso in this drawing. And so let's start with a little bit of a simplified Loomis approach. The head is turned 3/4 view. The hairline would be buried underneath the top of that cap, I'm pretty sure, so just to be aware of that. And this would be the brow line, the eye line, bottom of the nose, and there's the jawline, which brings the eyes into the middle. back of the neck, and then we're going to do some blocking in of the structure around the head. So we're going to think about this as a geometric shape. Just angles and distances. Something we practice a lot in intro. And we can think about this also simplified like that. And notice the more we do of this, the more of a sense we're going to have of the head as a three-dimensional form that's sort of perched on these shoulders. And even though this is a beautifully rounded form, I'm going to just turn it into a kind of a box. You see that? Now, I started that a little high. No, maybe not. This, remember, this is the hairline way up here. Here's the brow line. Okay, that's about right. Come down here. See, I'm relating where this collar turns back to where the bottom of that hat is. And the hat is, like all hats, it's extending past the boundaries of the head, So now I'm looking back and forth, and I'm feeling like maybe his head sticks up a little higher, so. See how easy it is to compare these forms when they're abstract, kind of geometric forms, and before they become hats on heads. So I'd like to challenge you to also find one or two things to change. And I don't normally do this, but I'm going to actually just sketch in the boundary of the paper, because look at how the hat really kind of lines up in there. And this is called the negative space around that's created between the forms and the boundary of the paper. And in this particular copy, I think it's going to be useful to try to sort of assess this negative space. Okay, let me lock my focus. And now I'm going to go right to the ear, and again I'm still sort of blocking things in. And now I'm going to try an approach that we have not been doing, but it's a nice strategy to fall back on sometimes. So what I'd like to do is imagine a center line along the front of this guy's face. Like, where would the center of the nose be? Very close to the edge. And then as the nose gets thicker right here, notice the center line would be a little more inside. It's going to curve up. It's going to go down the middle of the philtrum, dive down to the center of the mouth. It's going to go around the lip, back a little to the top of the chin, and then you can see that little crease in the center of the chin. And then I'm going to just reinforce this outside contour. And I'm going to go ahead and reinforce the ear too. So notice that if we imagine where the front of the ear is, and we think about what this distance is, and we compare it to this distance, this is about 10 times bigger. So if just think about what we're seeing here. If he was turning right towards us like this, that center line would be in the middle, but his head is turned so far around that it's about 9/10 of the way over. So try to keep that proportion in mind as you try to draw this center line with me. We're going to start it way over here. And even though this is not something that you can see on, remember here's where the bottom of the nose is. We don't see this on living people, but it's pretty easy to imagine most of the time. So, and it kind of, especially when the head is turned this far around, so we're almost approaching a profile, it's a way to sort of conceptualize the profile even though we can't see it. I used this line as a reference for the bottom of the nose, and I want to end up with my bottom of my chin right about here. Notice that the mouth is, as we expect, about 1/3 of the way between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin. And then I'm going to go ahead and sketch this other outside line. Not getting too hard into details yet. And then I'm going to just sort of back off for a second and ask myself if it seems like everything's oriented about right. And it feels to me like maybe I gave him a little too weak of a chin, so I'm going to just bring that out a little. And maybe this, see what I'm doing? I'm relating like this point here. Let me switch to my straight line tool. I'm relating like this to this, and I'm feeling like my indent here is drifting too far in front of here. It should be all the way back to here. So check that on yours, because I may have misled you. So that's going to require two fixes. I got to move this out a little more and move that back until I bring them into the correct relationship with each other. Okay, so this is not as I said, how I normally approach this problem, but it's just a little strategy, and you can try it and see if it's going to be helpful for you. Now we're going to do what probably feels a little more natural, which is instead of drawing the center line down the nose, we're going to draw the actual outside contour and bring it out past that cheek slightly. And I'm going to erase the center line. And I may as well erase it there too. And now that I've found this indent, I can place that eye in there. I'm going to start with the eye socket, which is usually a good idea. See that skin fold that goes around the bottom of the eye? Look how clear that structure is. See if I can get it even bigger for you to can really see what we're drawing here. See that little pouch? There's the iris, and there's something a little clumsy about the eyelid here. It looks a little too straight perhaps, but he still did a really good job of, notice how that he's got that iris really set back behind the front of the eyelid, which is way out here. And then this guy's got these hairy eyebrows that are sort of this line again is going to get in our way, the center line. And then coming from behind this pouch is what we can see of the cheek. Notice it's not much. And then that contour continues on the other side of the nose. Okay. So notice this nose looks really small for one simple reason, which is that most of the nose is way back here. So I'm going to make sure you put that nostril high enough. Notice it's elevated above the bottom of the tip of the nose. And let's use a lot of restraint there. It's not very dark. And just feel this movement of the ala. This sort of gathering a lot of energy and coming up high above the nostril. Like that, which is very important for his expression. It's got that kind of aggressive nose. And get rid of the center line here, and in place of the center line we've got this little shadow, that little portion of the philtrum there. And notice the whole side of the face past the center line is in shadow, so may as well knock that back a little. Even the white of the eye. Beginners never want to shade the whites of the eyes. And it looks terrible if you just leave them blank. And so here was our center line for the mouth, and that's where the little V is going to be, in the middle of the mouth. And then we're going to be coming down a long way on this side and a very short way on this side because of the turn of the head. And if you're thinking, oh, he looks too sad, well, all we do is we just give that little crease at the outside corner of the mouth, and now he looks like he's got a little secret, something happy he's thinking about. And we can also put this little halftone around here, make him look even happier. I'm always warning you not to outline the lips. Look at the beautiful subtlety here of that definition of the bottom lip purely through a little bit of halftone. Get rid of my center line again. And then we're going to be going down towards the chin. He's got, I think, a larger and stronger chin than I originally blocked out. So I'm going to tweak that a little. Never stop correcting yourself. Everybody wants to get to the point in the drawing when they can just stop thinking about what they're doing and just sort of just tune out and go on autopilot. And if you want to be great, that time will never arrive, and you should stop waiting for it. Always be trying to think about what you're doing and how to do it better. I mean, don't overthink it. That wouldn't be fun either, but autopilot is not good. And now we've got that other eye. Notice how this eye here is a little higher than this one, which is a perspective thing, because the mouth creates an orthogonal here, and the eyes create another orthogonal, and because he's turned away from us, these are converging. Okay, so we're just gonna place this other eye way back here, sort of above the corner of the mouth, and just a little higher. And remember that trick of just sort of put it in there like I just did as a little, a very like vague kind of little piece of dark, and then assess it before you have tried to add any details. You know, lean back and say, does that look about right? For placement, I can see that mine feels like it's just maybe a hair too far to the left. So as I darken the form, I'm just going to tease it over slightly to the right like that. I didn't even have to erase anything. Again, look how solid that eyelid is and how it extends out past the iris. A nice little bit of foreshortening on the iris, not too much. And beautiful definition of the lower eyelid, and that's something that beginners always forget about. They forget there even is a lower eyelid, but it's that little shelf of skin. It catches a lot of light, and it is really critical to get a sense of the structure of the overall eye. So that's not too bad for eye placement, but look what I did. I made the eye just a little too big, so And I mean, by a little, I mean like a half a millimeter or something. But I'm just gonna try to correct myself and just make it a tiny bit smaller like that. Sometimes when I get talking, I make mistakes that I might not make if I'm focused 100% on drawing. It's not perfect, but I can live with it. Now we're gonna zoom out a lot and see sort of if this is hanging together at all, like fitting with the rest of the head. And it makes more sense when you can see the whole drawing. Guess what? I'm shrinking that iris just a little bit again. That's when I'm figure drawing, especially when I was younger. I would draw the whole face, 5 or 10 times, just sort of knock it in, not like it, knock it in again. And that's okay. You're allowed to erase. You're allowed to start over. You're just kind of dialing in your skills. And there's no shame in that. It's like you go out and do free throws and you miss 10 in a row and take a break, think about your attitude and your mind, what your mind's doing to you, and then you go try again and start sinking them. Okay, so he's got this heaviness down around his throat, and I feel like I blocked him in a little tight right here. You see that? I need to bring this cloth down a little. Again, we're allowed to revise. And notice none of this is true shadow. This is all halftone, so and it's beautifully crosshatched. You see that back and forth? I don't expect you to get that exact effect, but a little bit of shadow right here underneath the chin. And you see how the skin is looking kind of dark and dirty around here, like not light and clean the way it looks in the drawing. That's because I don't have this dark back here yet. And as soon as I bring some of these dark accents in behind the chin, the shading on the chin is going to start making sense. Often you think you're shading things too dark, and then you realize, no, it wasn't too dark. There's just too much white paper all around it, which makes things look much lighter than they are. Notice the simplification in the cloth here. Obviously, sitters need to take breaks, and every time somebody gets up and goes to the bathroom or gets a drink of coffee or whatever, their clothes are going to shift. And when they sit back down again, you're not going to see the same folds that were there before. And there's different ways around that. One is to put off doing any clothing until just do it all at once during one sitting, one portion of the sitting. Another that we can do today is obviously to take a photograph and use the same photographic reference for all the folds. And another way to do it in the olden days was they would have life-size mannequins, and they would dress them in the clothes of the sitter, and they would do the whole face and hands from life from the sitter, and then they would set up the clothing on the mannequin and do it that way. Just use the mannequin as the motif. Okay, we're going to now change this into this beautiful flowing curve. And notice that the blocking in was really helpful, because that sort of shows me where the curve, gives me the parameters of the curve. Same with this one. See what I'm doing? I'm just sort of taking all these straight lines and turning them round, and getting a much better sense now of the cranium underneath this unusual hat. Coming a little close to the edge of my paper there. And again, beautiful hatching direction to copy here. Just try to copy what you see. And this comes around over here. And there is some subtle shading over most of these halftones, which is what's making his eye in the original look. The white of the eye is sort of jumping out more than it is in mine. Can you see that? So I'm just going to hit up some of these halftones very subtly. And see this form of muscle around the corner of the mouth? That's very beautifully shaded. And there's a little bit of a crease underneath of the jowl. That's sort of connecting here to this. It's not the jawline. I don't know what that is, but seems kind of pouchy. I would have loved to be a portrait artist in these days, because nobody had ever seen a photograph of themselves, so you could get away with a drawing like this. If you did it today, people would just say, like, oh, it's not flattering enough, it's not realistic enough. But as a drawing, I think this is a beautiful thing. feeling like I made his whole face and nose a little big, which is a really bad example to be making for you guys, since most of you struggle with the same thing. But I think I can recover a little bit just by putting the back of his neck a little further back, and maybe the ear just a little bit behind where I blocked it before. And you see what that does? It sort of creates a little more of the sort of massive scale of this guy's head. We're not going to go into too much detail in this drapery, although I would love to see some of you go back to the original and study it a little bit. You could learn a lot from this drapery, because I think what he did was probably blocked it in really quick during one of the sittings, and then he seems to have just sort of constructed these folds based on his study of what cloth does, his knowledge more than perhaps direct observation. So you could learn a lot by rendering it that way. You can't even just see what I was just drawing, so there we go. And what does it even say up there, I wonder? I can't read that writing, can you? Nope. It's in French, though, I'll tell you that much. So this drawing probably deserves more study and a little more of a faithful copy. But we're coming up on 40 minutes here, and I feel like at this point you probably know enough to do some of the improvements on your own from the original reference on the Metropolitan Museum website. And if you don't, and if your drawing is not structurally sound at this point, you probably would do better to just try again once or twice. See if you can get the general effect of this guy if you haven't yet, and then just post to me all your attempts. I will look very kindly on your effort. So there it is, the drawing by Fouquet of, never even bothered to find out who it is. Could be the guy who killed 400 children for all I know. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.